And great to be with you today. Thank you for your time today. And it's really great to hear that you have been undergoing these 7 lecture series already thinking about AI in education. I'm going to share my screen now. My screen hopefully has the Russian slides up. I'll be looking around my monitors because I have the English slides on one
Professor
screen.
Liu, could you please speak a little slowly?
Sure, no worries. Okay, so welcome for today. Thank you for joining us as we explore, I guess, ideas around AI and the future of education. Before we think about AI in education, I want to have a think about technology in general, and technology and humans, and how humans and technology interact. If you see this quadrant diagram on the screen, one way to think about this is places where technology contributes a lot or technology contributes a little bit, and places where humans contribute a lot and humans don't contribute as much. And so on the bottom right quadrant, for example, we may have examples of self-driving cars or robotic vacuum cleaners. And in these situations, you have humans not doing as much, but you have technology doing more. And so the self-driving car has the technology doing a lot of the work, whereas the human doesn't do as much. On the top left, we have an idea, for example, telehealth, which a lot of us had to use during COVID. Telehealth was a situation where you had to talk to your doctor over Zoom or over the phone. And in this situation, the doctor did most of the work, and the technology was there to assist the doctor to reach you, but the technology itself didn't do much work. When we kind of talk about the top right quadrant, this is kind of where we want to spend most of this session, is the idea that when you have high technology contribution as well as high human contribution, you really have that augmentation of human skill with the abilities of technology. So for example, 3D animation software is an interesting example because in this situation, you have humans putting in their creative talent, but you also have that creative talent being able to be used by technology and augmented by the technology in order to make something that either the human themselves or the technology themselves couldn't do. And so when we think about human and technology interactions, we can kind of pivot this to think about AI interactions with humans as well. So in this situation here, you've got the quadrants again, but the scales now are low AI contribution and low human contributions versus high AI contribution versus high human contribution. On the bottom right, you have the idea that if you have humans not doing much, but AI doing a lot, you have a situation where AI is creating something for the human instead. And often when we talk about ChatGPT in education, we think about, oh, our students might be using this technology to cheat, to submit work which isn't their own. And we want to try and avoid working in that quadrant. On the top left, we have some ideas around perhaps AI, if it doesn't do as much as we let it do, maybe AI can help us and our students to brainstorm things, to plan for things, to fix things up that otherwise we may have to spend a lot of time doing. But we want to kind of spend a lot of time today thinking about the top right quadrant, which is thinking about a situation where now and into the very near future and into the future, we have this idea that humans and AI will collaborate together. And so it's the idea of creating with AI as opposed to having AI create for us or just do some basic tasks for us. And in what we'll be going through today, some of the examples of prompts and what you'll be going through later on is also examples of how we can start to collaborate with AI to make our teaching more efficient and hopefully more enjoyable for us and also for our students. So I guess you've talked a lot about generative AI in your lectures that you've already been through. But I wanted to take a brief trip through this particular New York Times interactive piece, which is I personally find is a very useful way to think about how these large language models work. And this particular example that I'll take you through, which comes from the New York Times website, this particular example is where the authors of this article, they trained a baby version of GPT on the works of Jane Austen. So they gave this very simple artificial intelligence the 800,000 words that are present in Jane Austen's stories, and they got the AI to basically learn language based on these 800,000 words in the collection of Jane Austen stories. So what they did is they got this AI, and the AI is made up of, and you may have seen before in your previous lectures, AI is made of the neural network. And the neural network, when it first starts out and you try to get it to do something, the neural network is untrained and it won't give you anything particularly useful. Okay, so this is an example here. There's no words here that make any sense. And this is using the untrained neural network. Now, when you feed this neural network these 800,000 words of Jane Austen, and you try and get the neural network to learn how to replicate the language, what you find, or what the people found after 250 rounds of training, which takes about 30 seconds on a modern computer, you start to see some semblance of language here. So you see some very simple words come through, like maybe Mr., or what other words coming through here? As, shooter, so some very basic words just after 250 rounds of training this baby artificial intelligence. And as the training proceeded, so after 500 rounds, which takes about 1 minute on a modern computer for this baby AI, you can start to see some more words coming through. Okay, so you start to see some slightly more complicated words, for example, refer, or he, or was coming through. And then if we give the AI another 9 minutes of training, so after 5,000 rounds, about 10 minutes of training, you can start to see a lot more words coming through. Okay, so this neural network is now able to replicate the human language in a way that is similar to what it has seen in Jane Austen's texts. So in this situation here, after 10 minutes of training on a modern computer, you can see words like quite, married, some, decent come through. And then after 30,000 rounds of training, which takes about 1 hour on a modern computer, you can start to see that the AI, this baby AI, baby GPT, is starting to put very sensible words together. Every single word here makes sense and it is grammatically correct. And this is just after 1 hour of reading, or with AI being trained on 800,000 words of Jane Austen's stories. Now you can imagine what happens when a company like OpenAI or other open source models get trained on billions of words available on the internet and in books and those kinds of things. After these billions and billions of text, bits of text and words taken in by the AI, after millions of rounds of training, you can imagine how good these AIs can get. But fundamentally, what is happening is really what is happening is just that the neural network is just trying to predict language. Okay, it doesn't know anything per se, but it's just trying to put together language, words, sentences which make sense. One of the issues behind this, obviously, is that it looks good because it's able to reflect human language. We feel that it knows things, okay, but fundamentally it doesn't. It's just putting together strings of words which it has seen that fit together quite nicely. The other, I guess, implication here with what the training process is that whenever the training data set is fixed, and for GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, this was at the end of 2021, the training data that goes into training these AIs is static, and which means these AIs, these neural networks, are also static, which means that essentially their knowledge base or their training base is fixed at a particular point in time. Obviously, there's newer versions of these AIs coming out which have plugins, and these plugins are able to access the internet. And so this limitation of it not knowing what happened after September 2021 is not really a limitation anymore. But what is a limitation and an important consideration when using these AIs is the bias that these AIs have, because the training data set that went into training these AIs, they may have particular biases in the training data. For example, maybe most of the time it referred to doctors using the he or him pronouns. But we know now there are many more female doctors coming as well. And so there's some bias that is prevalent in the training data set, which is then reflected in the outputs of the AI. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this already. And the final thing that's worth mentioning here is that AI can hallucinate, and hallucinate just means that it makes things up. And it makes things up because it doesn't have a knowledge model behind it, it's a language model. And so it's able to string words together, which makes sense, but sometimes these words may not belong to each other, belong together, and it may not be accurate. So there have been some, I guess, attempts to try and put together some analogies to try and explain what this AI is like. People have thought, the AI is like a calculator because before we had calculators, we had to do a lot of long division, for example, a lot of mathematics by hand. And now that calculators have come around, we can do a lot faster mathematics. People have likened to Wikipedia because it is a very broad knowledge base of a lot of things that are known by humans, and it knows, or it has, I guess, in its neural network, it has a lot of information in there. Okay, so it's a little bit like Wikipedia as well. But like Wikipedia, we would never get our students to use Wikipedia and refer to it as a definitive knowledge source. We would always ask them to do some of their own research, to look up some more scholarly sources to use. And so it's a good starting point, but not a good final source for students to use. One of my colleagues recently said that ChatGPT is a bit like fire. And we all had a little chuckle when he said this. We thought that it was a bit of a silly analogy, but I think thinking about it, I think he's right in that fire and things like the steam engine are things that have transformed society. And I think this artificial intelligence will also transform society as well. So it's a bit transformative like fire was, and dangerous too, potentially, but used in the right hands, it's also quite powerful. And some final analogies is this AI is kind of like a well-read classmate or an assistant because it's read a lot of books, read a lot of things that are available on the internet, and it's able to help you with things. And this assistant or a colleague is kind of the manner I want us to use to think about GPT during this session. So in order to talk with your assistant, we need to do this thing called engineering of the prompt, prompt engineering, because the prompt is this thing that you have to feed the machine. And this prompt is what the machine uses to understand what you want it to do. And then this prompt is then fed through to a model. And the model, the most powerful models so far are GPT 3.5, as well as GPT-4. And then once the prompt is fed through to the model then produces a completion, and the completion is a response that you see coming through the web interface. And so knowing about the prompt is important, and knowing about the model is important, and knowing about the completion is important as well. Some other terminology which is helpful is this idea of the memory of ChatGPT. Now, I'm going to show a few pictures here. This picture, it's intentionally small and you can't read it. No, that's fine. This is a very long prompt that I've given the AI. Okay, that's my very first prompt. And then the AI has given me a completion. Okay, and then maybe I will give it another prompt. Okay, so prompt number 2, and it's given me completion number 2. And then maybe I will give it prompt number 3, okay, in the same conversation. And then what it's going to try and do is it's going to try and use the history of the conversation together to produce the next completion. Now, this red window that I've drawn here is called a context window when it comes to this particular AI. And the context window defines how much memory, I guess, how much text that has already happened can the model take into account. And with GPT 3.5, the model, the context window is smaller than GPT-4. And so the animation on the screen, which I'll go back to. So imagine at this point that I've got my prompt, and then GPT will try and produce a completion for me, okay? And then say, for example, that I want to prompt it again. When I prompt it again, because the context window size is limited, then when I prompt it again, its memory kind of will shift down a little bit, which means that essentially it's forgotten what I've told it in the very first prompt. Okay. So this context window is of a limited size in these AI models, and it determines, I guess, how much memory the computer has to look back on our conversation. So this means that when the computer is producing the final completion for me, it's using a lot of the information from our conversation together, but then it's missing a bit of the first part of our conversation. Okay. And this is important to know because these prompt or these context windows are limited, but it also means that if you have a very long conversation with the AI will start to forget things you told it at the very beginning. Okay, so you need to be careful how long your conversation is, and if you feel your AI is forgetting, then you may need to start a new conversation or remind it of things you've said to it before. So when we think about prompting is an interesting exercise because it's kind of like the new way to program a computer. In the past, we had to give computers special code in order for the computer to do things for us. But now we can use human language, natural language, to express things to the computer and get the computer to do things because we prompt it. This means that when we prompt the machine, we need to think like we're programming the machine. And when we program a machine, we need to be a little bit more precise with the way that we speak to it in order for it to produce something which is valuable for us. Another thing to remember when you are prompting and interacting with these models, especially the ChatGPT models, it's important to know that OpenAI says in their terms and conditions that your inputs, your prompts, may be used by them in the process of training their AI in the future. And so if you want to switch this off, you can. There's new privacy settings which you can use to switch this off. I do recommend this because then they can't use your data for training their models down the track. Okay, so we're going to be spending a bit of time. I'll be sharing my screen to show you a few examples of prompts that are useful for teaching, learning, and also assessment for both teachers and students. And the main tools that I'll be showing you are ChatGPT and also ChatGPT Plus. And I'll also be showing you a bit of Bing Chat, and also I'll be showing you a bit of Chatbot UI as well, which uses the GPT models under the hood. Okay, so I'll be showing you all of these tools today, and if you have access to these, you can then use them as well. A lot of these tools are free. For example, the first one and also the third one are easy to access. When we think about prompting, as we'll go through soon, it's important to remember that no one has all the answers. Because these neural networks are so large and so complicated, no one really exactly knows exactly how they work. Okay, so it's a little bit mysterious sometimes. And every time you give it something, it's likely to respond in a slightly different way every time. And so it means that if you don't like the completion, then just try a different prompt or try the same prompt again. And then because it's a chat interface, if you don't like the first completion it's given, you can either do the prompt again, or you can try and use a second prompt to say, fix up this particular part of your response. Okay, so use a chat interface to your advantage. The other way to think about prompting is that when you program the AI through the prompt, you want to program it in a particular way that helps it understand what you mean and want. And one of the ways to do this is by using this structure, which starts with the role. And so you give the AI a persona. So you say, act as an expert doctor, for example. You give it a task. So you say, write me a scenario involving a patient. You then give it some requirements. Okay, so this means the scenario needs to include a hospital stay and some morphine or something. Okay, and then finally instructions, what you want the AI to actually do as part of fulfilling this completion for you. Okay, so having a role, having a task, having some requirements, and having some instructions are really important ways to talk to the AI in order for it to produce what you want it to do. So I guess when we think about prompting in terms of education, we need to think about, well, what actually is helpful for education? And I want to spend just 2 slides talking about what is helpful for education. On the screen, you have some examples of research-based practices which people know help students learn. Okay, so for example, you have the idea of retrieval practice. And retrieval practice just means when you learn something, it's more powerful to learn something if you can draw it out from your memory. Okay, so if you can practice bringing it out, bringing information out from your memory, it really helps your learning. Okay, it's retrieving it from your memory. And so this is why, for example, students really like to do past exam questions because they get to practice drawing things out from their memory. Okay. Analogies are also useful. So if you teach sciences, for example, a lot of science concepts are very abstract, and helping students to make an analogy towards something a bit more concrete in their lives helps them to learn as well. Okay. Interleave practice is another interesting one. Interleave practice is about where you have, if you're studying concepts, then it's more useful to study them not one after the other, but you have to kind of mix them together, and it helps your brain form connections, and it helps learning as well. Okay, so in the prompt examples that we'll see soon, you'll see some examples of these come through. The other thing to think about in terms of assessment is that there are some things that people know work really well for assessment. So for example, having an authentic assessment includes making sure the assessment is realistic. It provides students some challenge, and it also helps students develop this thing called evaluative judgment, which is where they start to understand what quality looks like. Okay, and obviously feedback is a very important part of assessment as well. So through some of the prompt examples I'll show you soon, we'll see some examples of this come out. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to change out of my screen now and then show you some of the prompts that we'll be just kind of talking through. And these prompts will, I guess, help us demonstrate how we may be able to use GPT to help us with teaching, learning, and assessment. Okay, this very first prompt I want to show you is the example of getting GPT to help you with lesson planning. And the very first part of this prompt asks the AI to explain what these things are. You know, what's retrieval practice, what's analogy, and why are they useful? And then the second part is to say, okay, well, now that you know these things, design for me a lesson plan. So I'm going to pop into an English version of this now. Sorry about that. And hopefully that is coming through the screen. Let me just see if I can share it properly. Okay, so for this one, I will, first of all, I will ask, and I'll zoom up a little bit so you can see better. I will ask the AI to explain why these things are useful for learning. Okay, and the AI will explain a little bit about what these are, and then it will give me a little bit of completion to explain what these words mean. Now, the reason why I'm doing it in this way is because my first prompt and the AI's first completion, this information is now in the AI's context window. Okay, and remember, the context window is kind of like the computer's memory or the AI's memory for this conversation. And because this information about elaboration, about analogies, about retrieval practice is now in the context window, I can ask a second prompt in the same conversation, and the second prompt can now get the AI to draw from these ideas that it's already talked about. Okay, so that's going to be my first prompt. My second prompt in the exact same conversation is I'm going to ask it to act as an expert. Okay, and I'm going to ask it to design a tutorial for me using these things that we know are useful for learning. Okay, so here we have the AI trying to think about what students need to learn in this tutorial, and it's giving me suggestions based on the activities which I know work for learning. So for example, using analogies or using retrieval practice or using active learning. So here we can see the AI, for example, saying, in order to help the group practice retrieval practice, we need to divide the students into small groups, and then we need to ask each of the groups to think about what they already know, okay? And then have a session to share this out. And so what this helps the student to do is it helps them to bring things out from their memory, helps you as a teacher to understand what they know, and helps you to teach them more effectively. And so the AI here is acting as a teaching assistant for us because it's helping us to design a lesson plan. Okay, another example I want to show you is, let me just go back to my other slide. Another example I want to show you is, I might skip to this one over here. Okay, so this is learning by example. So we know concrete examples are very useful and important for students to learn. And so this particular example asks the AI to act as an expert in computer science. Okay. So you see what I'm doing here, the very first line here is that idea of giving the AI a role. And people have found that if you give the AI a role, like tell it that it's an expert in computer science, the AI actually tends to perform better for you. Okay, so act as an expert in computer science, it's a role. And then what I've given it next is the task. Okay, so I needed to give me real life scenarios, and I've given it some requirements, which are talking about cognitive biases. And then I've given it some instructions on how to write this up. Okay, so it's got role, task, requirements, followed by instructions. Okay, so again, I'm going to flip over to the English screen so I can show you this in action. Okay, so I'm going to paste this here. And again, what you're seeing here is that role, and then the task that I wanted to do, and then the requirements, and then the instructions. Okay, so having that role, task, requirements, instruction structure is quite helpful to help the AI think about what you want. Okay, so what it's doing now is it is producing these scenarios that I have asked it to produce. And scenario one is a phishing attack, and it's telling me that these are the two cognitive biases which it's embedding into the story, and then it's writing up the story for me. Okay. So if I was the person who was the faculty member trying to teach this, I may have to look up the internet for a long time to find these examples, but using ChatGPT, I can very quickly come up with some examples that I could use quite readily. I would not necessarily take this and put it in front of my students straight away. What I would do is I would think about this, use my expertise to edit this scenario, maybe chat with GPT to say, expand on this or write this a bit differently, and then I will give it to my students. So again, I would never just trust 100% what the AI gives me. I would always apply my expert lens to interpret it and to fix it up. Okay, but what the AI has helped me do though is it's given me a very good head start, saved me a lot of time in trying to think through and create these examples that I might use for my students. Okay. So the next example I want to show is maybe we can go through this one. Okay, so this is an example where I will ask the AI to produce different perspectives on crops. And these perspectives, I want it to draw from different cultural backgrounds. And then what it will do is I've asked it to kind of write these in the form of short interview quotes. So again, asking the AI to quickly produce lots of different examples for me. Now for this, what I might do is I might go into Bing Chat. I'll just share the screen again. And Bing Chat, I'm using Bing Chat here because it's a slightly different implementation of the GPT models. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so on the screen, you should see Bing Chat, which is free for everyone to use. And I'm going to pop my prompts into the bottom of Bing Chat down here. And what you'll hopefully see, if Bing Chat does its thing, is you see here that Bing Chat, I've prompted it, and then it's decided that it needs a bit more information. And so what it's done is it is searching the internet, the live internet, for more information about crops, genetically modified crops. And the benefit of using Bing Chat is that Bing Chat has this connectivity to the internet, which means that when it thinks it needs to know a bit more, or when it needs to draw from more more contemporary modern data, it can actually search the internet on your behalf and look up this data for you. And so what you see here is that it's given me, it's answered my prompt by giving me a little bit more, some examples of what farmers from around the world might say about genetically modified crops. Okay. And it's contextualized this in particular cultural context, which is what I asked it to do. And hopefully it's actually used some of the search results that it's gotten from the internet to produce more modern, up-to-date responses for me as well. Okay, so Bing Chat, quite useful for this. What I might show you next is, let me see. Okay, I might go to this one. Let me just tab back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so we've gone through a few examples of uses for teaching, and so you can see that it's quite useful to help you brainstorm ideas, plan for lessons. It's helpful for you to start to kind of come up with creative ideas for questions you might ask students and those kind of things. The next thing I want to show you is some examples of using the AI to help you prepare for assessment. And so one very easy example is on the screen here. It's the idea of using GPT to help you create multiple choice questions for your students to do. Okay. So down here, what we are doing is asking the AI to be an expert instructor in geosciences, and we're telling it to give us some multiple choice questions. Again, it's following this idea of role first, and then the task, which is making the questions, and then the requirements, which is the topics it needs to talk about, and then finally the instructions, how it needs to do it. Okay, so role, task, requirements, instructions, a very useful structure to think about prompting. And again, I'm going to pop into my GPT screen so I can show you this in action. And again, I'll do this in English. Okay, so that's the prompt that I'm going to feed it. And you can see very quickly that it's producing these questions for me. And it's following my requirements and instructions in my prompt, and it's producing the correct answer for me, and it's also producing feedback, which I can use for my students. So again, as an expert, I would not rely on this 100%. I would take the suggestions given by the AI, modify it based on my own knowledge of the domain, and then present that to my students. Okay, so it's giving me quite a lot of feedback here, which is very nice. And also what you notice here is that you see that it's the feedback it's giving me has a little question at the end. And the reason why it has this question at the end is because in my original prompt, I asked it to do that. I said, you know, instead of giving students the answers, encourage them to explore the ideas themselves. Okay? And so because I've asked it to do that, it's helping me to create those that kind of feedback. Okay. Another way that you can use GPT for assessment is to help you think about more creative ways to assess. So in this particular example, we have GPT acting as an assistant to help us create ideas around an assignment. And so we have a bunch of learning outcomes here for an assessment for a planetary sciences course. And we're asking the AI to say, don't think about essays because we do too many essays already in higher education. Think about more creative ways to assess. Okay. And so you can see here that what I've given it is I've given it a task, which is to suggest the creative assessment ideas. And I've given it some requirements as well. I have not told it to act as a role, and I also haven't really given it instructions. So when you're prompting, you don't always have to follow the role, task, requirements, instructions structure, but it does help. Okay, but in this particular situation, I've ignored the role and also I've ignored the instructions. Okay, so let me share my browser window again and we can see what this looks like. Okay, so I'll start a new chat. I'll put that prompt in and then see what the AI can give to me. So in this modern era of working in education with AI, often we struggle with thinking about how we can move beyond essay style assessments, because we know that ChatGPT is very good at writing essays for us. And so we need to think about assessments which may be a bit more authentic for students, might challenge students a bit more. And so what this prompt is doing is it's asking the AI to help us think about how we can design assessments in the age of AI. And so here what it's saying is one of the assignments that we could give to our students might be around data interpretation. Another example might be to create an infographic. Another example might be to host a debate. Another example might be to have a simulation workshop, and so on, and have a podcast. Okay. And the great thing about ChatGPT is that you can say to it in the chat, you can say, I like idea number 5. Can you expand on how students might learn effectively from this assignment? Okay. And so because these ideas about assignments and also the learning outcomes, it's in the conversation history or the context window of the AI. When I ask the AI the second prompt, the AI is able to then give me or use the history of our chat together and then improve upon its or expand upon its completions. And so here, for example, you're seeing that the AI is trying to explain to me why this 5th assignment that it suggested can actually help students learn. And it's saying some pretty good things, like it's saying that collaborative learning works really well. It's saying that students will need to research and synthesize information. They'll need to work on their communication skills, and they'll need to iterate as well. And so these are all really great things. If I had a teaching assistant, I would ask them these exact same things, and the AI is just operating 24/7 really fast for your ideas. Okay, so another example that you can use the AI for is, I'm going to share my other screen again, is the idea of getting it to help you write rubrics. A rubric, if you haven't come across the term before, is a kind of like a marking sheet or a marking scheme. It's a table which helps to describe your expectations for students. So in this particular prompt, we're asking the AI to, again, act as an expert. And we're saying that we need it to help us write a rubric. And the rubric is about an essay which critiques the use of technology in high schools. Okay, and the AI would need to help us generate the rubric rows. And so I'm going to tab into my browser again, and then show you this in action. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, so I've told it to act as an expert, and it's saying, I'll be happy to assist. And because I've asked it to ask me questions, it's going to ask me some questions. So let's start with the first question. What are the specific learning outcomes? Okay, I would like students to understand how technologies are implemented and how they impact learning in classrooms. Have a bit of a think about it. I'm deciding not to play nice right now. Let me try start a new chat and see what happens. Oh, there we go. Here it is. What key components? Okay. So let's say student engagement. Sounds good. Also teacher perspectives and impact on student learning. Okay, and it's going to keep asking me questions until it knows enough information about this rubric it's going to make for me. So what are the expectations? Doesn't matter. Students are free to choose any mode. Okay, any particular skills and competencies? Oh, yes. Okay, yes. I want students to demonstrate good integration of scholarly literature and also critical thinking. Okay, students can choose any technology. Okay, so high distinction would have more critical analysis compared to lower grades. Let's just say that and see what it can give to us. Okay, so now it's decided it's asked me enough questions and it's going to give me a draft marking scheme or rubric in order to help me with this assignment. And so you can see here that what it's done is it's taken the things I've told it about what is important for me. And as an assistant, as a teaching assistant, it's helped me to draft this table, which describes at different standards of performance, what I might be expecting from my students. Now, the rubric that it's produced for me here is not very good, but it's a good start. And what I can do now, though, is once it's finished generating this rubric for me, I'm going to ask it to do better. I'm going to ask it to do much, much better. So I'll say that rubric is quite vague. Can you update the rubric by rewriting each descriptor to provide more details about expectations? Okay. And so whenever I use this, I find it's typically quite good to ask it to try do it again and be a bit more specific. And what you can see now is that it is much more detailed in the examples that it's giving you. Instead of just saying it's exceptional or it's good or it's okay, it's giving you examples of what a high distinction student might do compared to what a distinction or a credit student might do. Okay. And what this has done for me now as a teacher is that it's saved me about 5 hours in trying to generate this rubric for myself. And then I can take this rubric, modify it based on my expertise, and then give it to my students so they can understand what I expect from them. Okay? And so again, I'm using the AI kind of like an assistant, a very well-read assistant, to help me through a lot of the things that I might need to do as a teacher. Okay, so I quite like this rubric. Actually, it's quite an impressive rubric. Every time I run this on ChatGPT, I'm always amazed and impressed by the kinds of rubrics it can give to me. Okay, another example I want to show you. This one, I'll tab back to here, and I might go to this one. Okay, so sometimes when we write rubrics for students, it can be hard for them and also for us to understand the difference between different levels of quality. And so what this particular prompt is trying to do is it's trying to encourage the AI to provide examples of quality at different standards. Okay. So again, I'm going to pop into a browser window so I can show you this in action. Okay. So in this example, what I've done is I've given it, just like the prompt that we saw on screen before, I've given it the pass criteria, I've given it the distinction criteria, and also given the assignment parameters. Now, often people ask me what these little asterisks and these hashtags mean. These asterisks in a particular language called Markdown, which is very common on the internet, these asterisks mean bold, and these little tags mean heading. And so because ChatGPT and GPT models were trained on so much information from the internet, these models have seen a lot of words written in Markdown language. And so therefore, these models seem to be able to interpret Markdown or understand the markings of Markdown. And so all we're telling to do here is saying, this is a heading. Okay, so pay attention to it as a heading. This is another heading. These are dot points. Okay, so dashes on a new line mean dot points. And this is another heading and some more dot points. Okay, but what this prompt is going to do for us is it's going to help us generate some examples of writing at a high distinction, or sorry, a distinction criterion, and also a pass criterion. And so here you can see, for example, that it's given me at a pass level, it's giving me these examples of writing. And at a distinction level, it's giving me these examples of writing. Okay. And so what I can do is I can quickly go to my students now and show them this and say, well, look, this is the difference between a pass and a distinction. A difference between a grade and also a B grade or something like that. Okay. So you can very quickly start to produce these resources to help your students out. Okay, I want to show you a few examples now of some prompts that students might find useful. And I'll skip quickly through these slides. I'll make these slides available to you afterwards so you have all the examples. That way you can copy and paste them into ChatGPT for yourself so that you can also try these out. But the example that I do want to show you, I think, is this one here. Yeah, it's this one here. So this one is from the perspective of a student, and the student will be asking the AI to act as an expert tutor. Okay. And so in this example, it's saying, it's kind of the reverse scenario of what we saw before about the create some examples for me. And this time it's from the student perspective. So what I'll do, I'll tab into a browser window again, and then I'll show this from a student perspective. Okay, so pretend I'm a student now, and I'm trying to learn about cognitive biases that might impact cybersecurity. Okay. So what the AI is doing is it's giving me a scenario, and it's going to ask me questions about this scenario. Okay, so imagine a company that has recently experienced cyber attack. Oh gosh, okay. Maybe recency bias, because they will only think, or they will mainly think about attacks that have happened recently. Okay, good. So it's giving me some feedback as my tutor, and it's saying that this is probably one of the biases which are present, or might be present in this scenario. Okay, and it's also encouraging me to think about some other things as well. Okay, wow, okay, this is quite challenging. I won't embarrass myself by trying to answer its question, but you're going to get the idea that by different prompts, we're now acting as a student and getting the AI to act as our tutor or our teacher for us. This another example I want to show you is an interesting one. So this one here, I think it's this one here. So this one is asking the AI to look up some trends in architectural design. Okay, you could use it for a lot of different things. It's asking it to look up modern ideas around architecture, and also it's asking it to draw something for us. Okay, and for this particular prompt, I'm going to use Bing Chat because Bing Chat can access the internet, and we need, for this prompt, we need the AI to actually have new data available to it. So let me open up Bing Chat. I will start a new topic, and then I will copy and paste this into it. Okay, I'm going to let it run for a little bit. Okay, so do you see what it's doing? It's actually searching the internet for latest trends in architectural design, and it's also searching the internet for leading architects. And then it's using the information which it's grabbed from the live internet in order to generate this completion for me. So the idea that these pre-trained models are limited by their training data sets is true, but not so important anymore because of the ability for some of these implementations to access the internet. Okay, so it's giving me some ideas that in the contemporary architectural space, there are ideas around green buildings, there are ideas around spacious design, functional homes, and these kind of things. And then it's producing me some names of architects with links as well. So each of these little things is a link to a particular website which it's found with some information. And so I'm able to cross-corroborate what it's found for me. And now it's bringing all that information together. And because I asked it to do so in the prompt, it's actually making some predictions of future architectural designs. Okay. And the final part of my prompt, and sometimes it doesn't work, so it'll be interesting to see if it works. But the final part of my prompt is to actually ask it to generate these images for me. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay, so it hasn't done it yet. So I'll say, oh, here we go. Hang on a sec. Nope, not doing that. Can you use the to generate some images of these potential signs? Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, so hopefully we'll see that it pops up a little image generation tab. Nope, hasn't done that. Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But what you can see here is that what it's done is it's drawn from the internet. It's synthesized the information for me. And if it was working today, then it would actually also draw these designs for me. But what it has done nicely is search the internet for some images, which I may be able to use. Okay. So Bing Chat, free, quite useful for students to get some inspiration about things. Okay. A last example I want to show you, I'll just go back to my PowerPoint. This example here, I quite like because it's actually strangely accurate. This one, from a student perspective again, is asking the AI to pretend to be an expert educator. And I'm going to give it part of my assignment as a student, and then part of the marking rubric. And I'm going to ask it to give me feedback as a student. Okay? So I'm going to copy and paste this and go into the browser window again. And what I've done here is I have, actually, no, I'm going to use this one. Formatting isn't so weird. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm asking the AI to be an expert. Okay, I'm going to give it my assignment text. And then I'm going to give it the marking rubric down here. And then the marking rubric is expressed down here. So this is the criterion, this is the fail descriptor, this is the pass descriptor, this is the credit descriptor, distinction, and also high distinction. And I'm going to feed all of this through to the AI. And most of the time when I actually run assignments through this, so these are not student assignments, my own writing through this, I find that it's actually able to give quite good feedback for students or for the text that I submit to it. And so you can see here what the AI is doing is it's saying, you know, generally good work. If you are aiming for a high distinction, then these are some suggestions of what you could do. Okay, so for example, be a bit more specific, include a bit more rationale, be a bit more critical when you use the literature, and also provide some proposals for improvements and other ideas of things I could improve. Okay, so as a student, I would find this quite powerful because if my teachers let me use it, I could use it as a 24/7 tutor in order to improve not just my expression or my grammar or my sentence structure, but my actual critical analysis or my actual writing itself. Okay, so AI can do a lot of things which more simple grammar and sentence checkers can't really. Okay, so then the idea, I guess, thinking about this is how can we actually make generative AI work for us? And some of the ideas might be around, well, what are some of the problems that we experience as educators, as teachers? We struggle, all of us struggle with workload and time. And so the question is, can we actually use AI to help us save time? And some of the examples we've seen, hopefully, by using AI to generate rubrics for us, to generate ideas for classes for us, generate assignment ideas for us, that will hopefully help to save us some time. And also, can AI help us to motivate some students? And so some of the examples we've seen today of the prompts might include things that you can get the AI to generate examples which are from real life or similar to real life, which will help to motivate the students and build relevance in your courses. And so the idea here is that, can we use AI and collaborate with AI, work in that top right quadrant and start to teach with AI, collaborate with AI as part of our teaching. And finally, thinking about what we need to do in the next day, in the next week, in the next few months to start thinking about how we respond to AI. I think one of the most important things is not about AI, it's actually about learning. It's really important for us to know how learning works. Okay, so why does retrieval practice work for learning? Why does analogies work for learning and those kinds of things? Okay, so if you have a knowledge of learning sciences and how learning works, it really helps you to know how to use AI better. The next thing is to actually experiment with the AI itself. And so run some of your assignments through it. Try some of the prompts that you've seen today. Okay, because the more that you use it, the more comfort and expertise you'll build with it. You don't have to become an expert in it, but I think it's our responsibility as teachers to be able to learn the technology enough so that we can help our students understand it better as well. In the process of doing so, come to things like this. Listen to talks online, talk to your students and talk to your colleagues. Your students are probably using ChatGPT a lot themselves already, even if they may not admit it, and learn from them. Okay? And most of all, I think it's really important for us as educators to be able to show our students how we can productively and also responsibly use AI, how we can engage with AI in a safe and ethical way, but in a way which embraces the future, which is a situation where we'll have humans collaborating side by side with the artificial intelligence to speed things up, to give us all more time so that we can spend more time being human with each other, which is what is at the center of education. So with that, that's all I have for demonstration today. I'll share the slides with you afterwards somehow, so that you can get access and copy and paste all the prompts that you saw today. So I think we'll open to questions now.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu. Thank you for your presentation. And thank you for the prompts that you've shared with us today. Indeed, our participants have already tried doing prompts, and we discussed about probably you've heard of this tool where we post various ChatGPT prompting options and various AI and neural network options, how they can be used in our educational work. We have 16 works there on that. So this is a good dimension, and we have multiple questions to you. We dare to ask them. Have you tried writing teaching aids by using ChatGPT, and what neural networks are better suited for that? Teaching aids. This is the summer season when we have to get ready by writing and drafting our teaching aids. Is it an option to use ChatGPT or other neural networks that would help us in accomplishing this task?
Yeah, it's a great question. Can I clarify, a teaching aid, is that kind of like a set of instructions for our students to read?
Well, a teaching aid, yes, indeed. This is some material for students that they would use in order to prepare for their workshops, practical exercises for them to study material and then to take an exam.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so definitely, ChatGPT. If you saw before, one of the examples was it trying to generate some assessment ideas for us. A thing that you could then prompt it with is, can you produce a set of instructions for students, or can you produce a teaching aid? And it will be able to draft that for you. Again, it saves a lot of time. It may not be perfect to start with, but it's a very good start, and it will save you a lot of time down the track as well. So yeah, great idea.
Clear. Thank you. And I can tell you on my own behalf, I've tried doing it. I've tried prompting like the agenda of the course, etc. And ChatGPT gives you ideas that you would never think of. Certainly, this is not 100% off-the-shelf teaching aid that you can share with students for them to use. But at least this is the starting point, and you already have some draft, some basic points, some baseline, and this is great. We have a great community. When working on one idea, we will generate new functions for ChatGPT. Okay, our participants are saying, indeed, recently they have prompted, you've described the pedagogical methods that can be used in teaching, and Yelena is texting, she has tried it. She tried to see what assignments can be used in architectural design. Okay, so what prompt text should be in order to organize project assignments for our students? So what should we write in the prompt? So what should be the wording of it?
Yep, great point. So I think in this example, maybe I will try and share my screen again, and maybe I'll show you on the screen, unfortunately in English though. Let me have a look. Okay, so for a project assignment, what I might suggest here is the first thing I would always suggest is give the AI a role. And so you could say, act as an expert higher education faculty member who has expertise in project-based learning. Okay, and so that role sets the AI up to think about, project-based learning. For some reason, it works. No one really knows why it works, but it works. And then you would give it the task, and so you might say, write an assignment brief where students need to work on an project for an architectural design firm or something, and then you would give it a bit more detail about what you wanted. Okay, and then you'd say students need to work in teams. Describe how I would maybe best support these teams. Okay, so what you're seeing here is you're seeing that this top thing is the role, that the persona that the AI needs to go into. You're giving it a task to work on. You're giving it some requirements, which the AI needs to consider, and then you might consider giving it some instructions. So this is a very basic prompt. You would hopefully give it more information than this, but just using this information here, the AI you can see can start to produce something basic for you, which like Tatiana was saying as well, it's may give you some ideas that you've never seen before. And it's a great start, better than a blank page. Yeah, so that's good. You see, it's giving us all these learning outcomes, assignment requirements. And again, because it's a chatbot, my recommendation would be to chat with it. And you can say something like, you could say, for example, that the design brief will be too difficult for my first year students. Can you suggest an alternative? Right. So you can chat with it and ask it to improve or change upon its thing, and it will actually act as an assistant and work with you to change it.
Super, great. Thank you so much. Our attendees really liked your prompts in the slides that you've shared and that you typed in. So maybe it would be possible for us to get those prompts, because they are trying to make pictures of the screen, but we are moving so fast that they cannot do it. So please share those prompts with us. Thank you so much. there's another important question. Have you tested AI and ChatGPT in psychology? Are there such practices? Well, this is not a very specific question whether it is about teaching psychology or about psychological assistance or counseling. It's not really clear, but have you dove into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of teaching of psychology, it's because ChatGPT or GPT models have been trained on so much information from the internet. It definitely knows about psychology and psychiatry and these kinds of things, and well-being and mental health. And so you'd be surprised how much it actually does know about these things. And so my recommendation would just be to try it out. It can definitely do it. Some of the examples I show in some of my other webinars are around questions which, well, actually, there's one which I might show you. This one. Okay, so this one, let me just share my screen again so I can show it to you. Just try to find it. 45. Okay, sorry, let me just share my screen so I can show this one to you. Okay, so on the screen you should see this one. This is a universal simulator. I saw this one from Ethan Mollick, who's a very great thinker about AI from the US, and he has this example where you get the AI to act as a practice scenario maker. And so in this example on the main screen, you have the AI helping you conduct negotiations. But in this bottom one, I'll copy and paste this into a chat window. And let me just share a chat window. And I'll start a new chat up. Okay. And so this example here is asking the AI to help me conduct bedside negotiations or bedside consultations in a large hospital. And so it's going to pretend to, act in that persona of being a patient or a family member, and it's going to think about all the psychological aspects of that interaction as well. Okay, so here, for example, the patient or the family member has said, "Good morning, doctor. How are things going with my recovery?" And me as the student doctor, I could say, I wouldn't say this, but you say, "Not great. You haven't done your exercises." Okay. So then it's grading me a D fail level. It's saying, "I lack empathy. I haven't provided information about the status and everything." And so because these AIs have been trained on so many billions of words across the internet, it has a very general knowledge of a lot of different things. And you can see here that, just using this prompt here, I'm able to get it to help me practice be a good doctor. Okay, so I'm going to stop generation there, but you can see that it does have broad knowledge across a number of different domains.
Thank you. This is really interesting. I think that we can experiment endlessly here, that even the colleagues who work as teachers of psychology can actively use this to assess and evaluate their consultations and benchmark them against those proposed by ChatGPT and what the students make. I think there are no boundaries for using ChatGPT also in psychology. Thank you very much indeed. We have another question. How can we set a role to ChatGPT? Indeed, sometimes we are in doubts, and some people say, let's say, if you teach lawyers, what should be the role set to AI? A lawyer, a methodologist, or a judge, or whatever. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I would think when you're trying to prompt the AI to be a particular role, you need to think about the purpose of the conversation that you're trying to have with the AI. So if your purpose is to help students experience what it's like to be in court and practice argumentation, then maybe the role you want to give to the AI is act as a magistrate. If the purpose of the conversation is to help you think through different scenarios you might present to a student, you might say act as an expert case lawyer, or act as an expert barrister instead of a magistrate, because they would be more familiar with the case law, for example. So the role depends on the purpose you want from the conversation.
All clear. Thank you so much. There's another question. What chat we should use in order for prompting pedagogical technologies for practical exercises in architectural design, if we speak about architectural professions? I mean, either ChatGPT or Bing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would suggest starting with ChatGPT to start with, just because ChatGPT is, or at least the free version, is quite fast, and you can give it a lot of text. Bing Chat is good, but Bing Chat is limited in the amount of text that you can give it sometimes. The benefit of Bing Chat, like we've seen before, is it is able to access more contemporary information from the internet. And so it's important that way, that if you need up-to-date information, then Bing Chat is probably the place to go for it. But I think so. Bing Chat. Let me share my screen again. Actually, I'll show you what the different settings are in Bing Chat. When you start using Bing Chat, it comes in these 3 different modes. When you choose the creative mode, this is when it uses the GPT-4 model under the hood. If you go for balanced or the precise versions, it doesn't use GPT-4. And GPT-4 is the more powerful model, which is much better at reasoning. And so if you want to use Bing Chat, it's got good things about it because it can access the internet. And if you choose the creative mode, which I recommend, this is where it uses GPT-4, the more powerful model under the hood. So as with all prompts and all generative AI, I think the main thing is just experiment. Start with ChatGPT, but experiment with Bing Chat, especially if you need up-to-date information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can ChatGPT or Bing Chat offer a methodology for teaching Russian language in a college in Armenia? Well, I think it can.
Let's try it. Let me share my screen and let's give it a go. So let's say, can you provide some suggestions for teaching Russian language in a college in There we go. So it's given us some pretty, I mean, they're fundamental suggestions about what makes good teaching. So for example, include cultural immersion, include practice, integrate technology and everything. But again, it's a good start, isn't it? And you can see here that it's got a lot of different knowledge from across the spread of what humans know. And so it's able to draw from that immense base of understanding.
Thank you. That's what I've said. It has no borders. Certainly, there are issues about the content and about your expert knowledge, But whatever you ask GPT to say, it's always ready to help colleagues, so try. Professor Liu, there's another interesting question. Is it possible somehow to link the functionality of two neural networks? Let's say, let's take chess. I would like to combine the text ChatGPT model, the functionality of the text comments with the AlphaZero neural network, or the Stopfish chess engine, or some online chess games. Do neural networks support connectivity of this kind? If not, then can I feed the database to ChatGPT by myself? Or maybe this has been done somehow in other domains.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Again, let me share my screen and I'll show you what's going on with GPT-4 and also Chat GPT Plus. Let me just find my screen again. Okay, so unfortunately, the paid version of ChatGPT has this available to it. GPT-4, which is available to the paid version, has the ability to bring in plugins. This has been around for about 2 months already, I think. And with these plugins, what it allows you to do is it allows you to link different tools together into the ChatGPT ecosystem. So for example, here we could actually link in Wolfram Alpha, which is a very powerful mathematical computation engine. And when we ask ChatGPT to solve a physics problem, for example, ChatGPT will know, oh, I can't do this as a language model, but I can send that information to Wolfram Alpha, which can then get the solution for me. And then these plugins, it's growing day by day. Every day there's new plugins, and you can actually have a chess plugin as well. And so it will be able to interact with a chess AI and play chess with you as well. Okay, so lots of different possibilities out there because of this plugin ecosystem, which has been built around ChatGPT.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. You know, when we started working on this, within this short time frame of 4 weeks, we could see about 12 novelties about connectivity, plugins, development of new systems. Everything evolves so fast that sometimes you feel scary. If you're not keeping an eye on it on a daily basis, you can lag behind. And naturally, Professor Liu, what do you do personally in order to catch up with this? How do you fight this fear, or don't you have this fear of lagging behind?
Really great question. A question I ask myself every single morning when I wake up and I read Twitter and see all the amazing things which have happened overnight while I slept. It's really hard to keep up, and it's very okay to feel overwhelmed by these new developments. It is a very fast-moving field, and I think going to events like this, talking to your colleagues who might be experimenting, talking to your students who are experimenting as well, I think is really important. So keep talking to people, keep experimenting yourself. It's okay to feel a bit behind. I certainly feel behind. And I feel that even if I don't read the AI news or Twitter for one day, I'm going to be horribly behind. And it's natural. Yeah, it's hard to keep up with it, but I think the main thing is keep talking to people, keep reading things online if you can, and go to these events where people try to summarize all the information for you so you can learn quickly.
And you feel scared not only because you didn't learn something, but because today you have to go to the class, you have to teach, and then you have this feeling that maybe you're doing something wrong today because everything is moving forward, and you take this textbook and you can see the year it was published. So there's a contradiction, a mismatch, and this causes anxiety in educational domain as well.
Yeah, it's a very great point. I always think back to 2020 when COVID started, and when we all had to suddenly teach online and our students had to learn online. I think one of the really amazing things that happened, interesting things that happened during COVID, even though it was a terrible disease, terrible around the world, one of the really interesting things that happened around education was teachers felt okay to be vulnerable in front of their students. And because we were all learning how to interact online, how to teach, how to learn online, and teachers, open their living rooms to their students, open their pictures of their kids and those kind of things, that we all felt vulnerable together. I think 3 years on, it's the same story with generative AI. We're all learning together, and it's okay, I think, to feel a bit vulnerable around this, and to say to your students, look, it's new. We're all learning together. I don't know all the answers. You don't know all the answers, but together, I think we can work this out.
Thank you so much. That is why we have established this community. Dear colleagues, please stay connected. Our chat that we've launched, our Telegram chat, not ChatGPT, it has been launched for us to discuss these issues. And even after the completion of our meetings, of our broadcasts, you will have this opportunity to write your prompts. And then the wrapping up question. It is very practical, and indeed, our teacher has some issue. I'm reading. I have issues with prompting. There's an assignment of linking the first and the second half of the sentence. It either gives me altogether, or the numbering in the columns is wrong, and then it provides me wrong answers.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. If the input to the so I guess I don't know enough about the question to answer it very clearly. But if the prompt that you're feeding it is not in English, one thing I would suggest is maybe to translate it to English first and then give the AI the English prompt, just because the AI has learned a lot more English compared to other languages. And so it may be able to function better in English initially to answer your question. I guess the only other thing I would suggest is try to, what the AI is not so good at is it's not so good at more kind of logical or mathematical kind of connections and questions. If you're able to change a prompt or word it in a way which the AI might be able to understand better, that might work. The thing with prompting, hopefully what we've seen today, is sometimes prompting works, sometimes it doesn't work. But when it doesn't work, don't give up. Just try a different way to ask it. Perhaps try a different language to ask it in, and then keep trying and trying again.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Professor Liu, for your time. Thank you for your engagement and for your answering and for working in this domain. Indeed, when you're aware that around the world there are similar challenges that you are facing, and these are the issues about wording the prompts, then you are willing to continue and you look forward to it. Thank you so much, and we hope that we will see each other again, and sometime after we'll be able to discuss ChatGPT 5 and its capacity. Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.